Human beings were meant to handle stress and be able to tolerate stress. However, when stress is continuous, it becomes an event or it becomes a way of being. So, what happens is your nervous system never actually calms down, and we are only meant to have certain amounts of stress and then we go back to our original state. Now, a lot of people are under an immense amount of daily stress. So, self soothing or ways of being are not actually being handled in a correct way, and relief is found very limited in people. They're not able to do it without using any form of drugs or alcohol. Now, when you use drugs or alcohol to be able to self-soothe, it becomes more of a problem. People that have learned to use intoxicants as a self-soothing way of being often cannot tolerate stress after the fact. So people that drink more are actually not able to regulate their emotions. They're more likely to be impulsive, and they also are more likely to create more problems within their life. This way of being is actually really harmful. So what happens is that people tend to not be able to know how to tolerate stress. So the one stress that I'm actually going to be talking about is shame. And it is an emotion that is actually internalized, and it has less to do with you as an individual and more as what has been done to you rather than you yourself. So the difference between shame and guilt is it can be more resolved. It's more of an action that has been done, such as making a mistake, which can be rectified. Whereas shame, it's usually internalized by someone that was already carrying anger and basically placed it on you as a way to limit stress. They used it as a way to tolerate stress, and they used it as a way that was not healthy, or it was not conductive to either one's well-being. So shame is an internalized action that has been done to you and not to you. So what happens is that if a person is in a state of danger and they are not able to access anger due to being in a state of powerlessness, they actually have no choice but to recoil into themselves. And what happens is they either go into fight or flight response, or they freeze. And this is essentially what happens with shame, is that when someone freezes, they recoil into themselves, and then they kind of break apart. And this is what we can call a dissociation, which is the start of dissociation. Everyone is dissociative to a degree, but shame is when you actually experienced that trauma and then internalized it. So what is helpful when internalizing shame and be able to find relief from it is to be able to access your anger. Anger is kind of like the stepping stone above shame, and it's action oriented. If you ever remember the last time you've gotten angry, it has probably taken you a very long time to kind of calm down, because anger is an indication that consistent boundaries have been crossed, or you're crossing your own boundaries. So anger is kind of that state of change. So in this video, I'm going to be giving an example and kind of a helpful step-by-step process of being able to break out of shame. Now, this is not a cure-all, and it is not something that happens overnight. It is something to keep in mind so that you can be conscious of your choices. And choice is basically choosing your thoughts are going to extremely helpful when breaking away from shame. So since shame is nothing to do with you and more to do what has already been done to you, that's already in the past. So when people experience shame, they're already feeling extremely vulnerable. They are feeling extremely defensive. They oftentimes feel kind of a sensation in their stomach area, which is an indication of basically emotional buildup. And it's usually stored within the stomach area or kind of above the belly button area. Sometimes it's within the face area, depending on the person, but it's definitely a warm feeling, or some might call it like a burning feeling. It's different than the sensation of love. So it's very helpful to acknowledge that this is a sensation that you are feeling, and to acknowledge that it is there. The worst thing that you can do for yourself is to suppress shame, because the action of shame has already been suppressed, and it is suppressed due to anger. So the first thing I would like to point out is that trauma usually develops what I like to call a loop, and it's usually comes in forms of flashbacks or things that are said to you, or kind of like a 10-second movie scene. And what happens is this kind of happens with our thoughts as well, and we generally go higher up in the ladder with our thoughts, or kind of lower in the ladder with our thoughts. So this is where a helpful thought comes into play. So let's say, for example, I'm going to be giving 2 examples of a positive and negative loop thought. So the first thought is, I'm not good enough. The second thought is, I'm not able. And then the third thought is, I'm unworthy. So I want you to think for a second how that makes you feel within your being and within your body, right? Because this just our thoughts on maybe a daily basis. So the second loop that I'm going to bring up is, I am enough, I am able, I am qualified, and I am certain. And notice the shift within your body when you feel these things. So this is very helpful when practicing what I like to call loop thoughts, because what you think will create a bodily response or an emotional response, right? So this will apply to the 3-ish questions that I actually have. And it's very helpful to, you can either keep this in mind, or you can actually apply it to your daily life. So the first question is, what happened that caused a negative response in my body? The second question is, what negative event caused me to internalize? Or what did this event cause me to internalize? And the third question is, how did this make me feel about myself? So you can take as long as you want to answer these questions, and you can do it in your own timing. Now, having these questions in mind will allow you to navigate what you actually want to experience. Now, our brain has billions of neurons, and these neurons actually communicate to each other, and they communicate and remember through past experiences. So the way that you form beliefs and thought patterns is based on these neurons and the repetitive experiences or thoughts that you give it. So it's kind of like a lens that you see the world through. So if you happen to be a really beautiful person, but you have thoughts about yourself that you are not, you will kind of filter out people or opportunities or events that kind of don't fall into this lens that you're wearing or the way that you're seeing things. So if you would like to actually view yourself as beautiful, then you will have to change your thoughts or your thought patterns, and then look within your daily life to see how those thought patterns add up. So let's say, for example, a person on the street looks at me. If you have a thought pattern of, oh, that person thinks that I'm ugly, your brain is going to reinforce that particular belief and aka lens that you're seeing the world through. Now, if a person looks at you on the street, maybe stares a little bit, you could change your thought pattern and say, hey, that person's looking at me because they might think I'm actually really beautiful. This will kind of change the way that, or back up the way that you see your environment or how people see you or view you, which will then kind of affect the way that you view yourself. So shame is what I like to call a social emotion. People that actually care about other people and their well-being have a sense of, or more able to experience shame. So it's not exactly a bad emotion. It just means that you're a social person and that you actually are connected to other people in a very subtle way. This is why people that are addicted to certain drugs or alcohol kind of lose that shame or that moral compass, because they no longer feel a connection to other people and they feel more of a connection to the drug. So this is very helpful when it kind of views the way that you want to break out of that feeling of shame. And so this is something that you can either practice in your daily life, or it's something that you can either write down, or it's also really helpful to discuss it with a person that you trust, because people generally have different experiences and different perceptions of you. So it's very important to note and choose or be aware of what you have internalized, and realize that you are in a different place right now, and you're not in the same place that you were. So even if you're not where you want to be, shame is an indication that something has already happened, and that you have the choice today to be able to choose the life that you would like to live, and choose the life how you would actually like to be and view yourself. So thank you so much for listening. And if you're interested, I have a Spotify that I will leave in the description box below. And I do have a little meditation kind of guided session that talks about kind of self-soothing as well. And I also have a YouTube video as well that is helpful as well when it comes to self-soothing. I also do daily quotes on my Instagram, and as well as I do weekly videos. And of course, I do individual sessions with people as well. So I will leave all that wonderful information in the description box below, but I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you on my next video.